Hello, everyone. This is attempt number 2 of this podcast. I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am joined by my fellow soldier, Connor Nielsen. Connor, how are you today?
I'm well. I'm trooping along, but I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well, swell, as a Kansas farm boy might say. And we every now and then we talk about things that are Twin Peaks adjacent, I think is the phrase we've settled on. We talked about all of the Twin Peaks stuff, and so now we're talking about movies and TV shows with alumni who worked on Twin Peaks in some way. And last time we spoke, you chose the movie Black Hawk Down from, is it 2001? And
Yeah.
this is a based on real events, starring just about every actor that you've ever heard of. And why don't you tell us a little bit about it, Connor?
So, Somalia, 1993. There's a Black Hawk helicopter, and as the title alludes, it goes down. A little bit more context around that. There is a situation in Somalia around warlords fighting each other. It is alluded to as a civil war early on, and as a result, there's hundreds of thousands of people in Somalia who have um, are dying of starvation due to a famine. And as a response, the UN and major countries around the world have tried to provide relief. And the largest of these warlords, Mohammed Farah Adid, as everyone's sort of pulling out after sending relief, he sort of goes after the peacekeepers that are still in the country. And in response, the United States is sending in basically all of the big, most elite squads of their armed forces. You have Army Rangers. You have, I think, like recon Marines. You just have like all sorts of, the most elite soldiers that they can send in to take out this warlord, and they want to get it done in 3 weeks. And as the movie begins in October of '93, it has been 6 weeks, and in Washington's impatience, a Black Hawk helicopter gets shot down, and it spirals into a frenzy as soldiers are lost in enemy grounds, and it is a fight for survival. Among the cast, we have Josh Hartnett, Ewan McGregor, Ewan Bremner, Tom Sizemore, who was our Twin Peaks connection, just everyone, William Fichtner, Jason Isaacs. Did I already say Josh Hartnett?
Yeah.
Orlando Bloom from the Pirates of the Caribbean and Lord of the Rings movies. Just yeah, it's a who's who of white brunette fit actors from the early millennium. Uh,
Mhm.
so, Comics Kid. By the way, it should be said this is directed by Ridley Scott. How did you feel about this movie, Comics Kid?
Um, this is probably the hardest movie that I've had to watch for this podcast. You know me. I like to keep it light and breezy with the movies I watch, and this is not. But I can't say that it's a bad film. I feel, and I also don't watch a lot of war movies. I think we touched on that a little bit last time we spoke, and I can get into. I think I've hammered down exactly why I don't watch a lot of war movies, but we can talk about that later. But so it's going to be hard for me to like say, was it a good movie? I think it was, but it's probably a movie I'm not going to watch again, even though I do think it does some stuff very well. What about you?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things kind of before I give you my opinion. This is the second time I've seen this movie. First piece of backstory here is one of my New Year's resolutions every year is to go through a director's filmography. And 2 years ago, in 2021, I was going through all of Ridley Scott's movies. So that's when I watched this movie for the first time, where I watched just the theatrical version, and then today I watched yesterday I watched the extended version.
Oh,
And then it's only 8 minutes longer, and I
okay.
honestly didn't really notice any difference. And looking up differences online, I was like, oh, that's a new scene. I
Hmm.
didn't remember some of those finer details in the theatrical cut. Um, or it's not one of those things where I was like, "Whoa, that's a finer detail that I didn't know, that is jumping out at me." So the other thing is that I watched recently the 1930 All Quiet on the Western Front, which is the third film to win Best Picture. And I'm glad I did that because are you familiar with the movie It Happened One Night, Comics Kid?
The movie, what?
It Happened One Night.
I've heard of it, but I'm not. I can't say I'm really familiar with it.
Okay, I've not seen it either. The one thing I really know about that movie is that it's like the romantic comedy. Like it is the movie that created the formula, like the way everyone has done romantic comedies in like the 70, 80 years since that movie's come out
Hmm.
is how we're still doing it. And I kind of realized that that original All Quiet on the Western Front is kind of the same thing, but for war movies.
Mm.
Basically, every war movie is in some way like kind of recapturing that. Some kind of go for more realistic, some go for more about like this chaos element. That's this movie to a T. But stuff like Stanley Kubrick's movies, Paths of Glory and Full Metal Jacket, Dunkirk, 1917, Come and See, and then even the movie that came out last year, All Quiet on the Western Front. Like these are all that, and I found that kind of interesting. I'd say the one war movie that I've seen that I do feel like is kind of breaking that mold a little bit is Apocalypse Now. But even then, like the influence back to the 1930 movie is undeniable. Anyways, so I was just kind of watching this movie with that perspective of this is Ridley Scott doing All Quiet on the Western Front to some degree,
Hmm.
and I like it. I like this movie. I'm not a huge war movie guy. Some of my favorite movies are war movies. Like I love Apocalypse Now. I mean, it's a very depressing, dark film, but it's fantastic. I love Paths of Glory. But it's interesting going to this movie because this movie came out when I was 6. And so basically, like my entire upbringing, this is just what war movies look like. And so
Hmm.
it's really hard for me to put myself in like the headspace of like how effective this movie is to me because it's like before I even watched it the first time, I didn't realize it, but like I've sort of seen all the movie's tricks before,
Hmm.
and but even with that, I did like it, and I think a lot of that can just kind of be accredited to Ridley Scott, where he's definitely aping his brother's Tony Scott style. Um, it looks a lot like a Tony Scott movie. Like everyone's sweaty. There's like the high contrast colors and very chaotic editing. But it kind of has that Ridley Scott portent where everything's very serious and he kind of controls the chaos in a very compelling way. I think because there's not really a main character. Like you can kind of point to Josh Hartnett. There are like threads you can follow, but this is more of like this sort of eyes down look at a situation where the director is sort of playing like the conductor to the symphony and trying to orchestrate everything. And I think he does a very good job.
Yeah. I am probably going to be in a similar boat to you. I would say I know even less about war movies than you do, it sounds like. But I also don't really know. I think the last war movie I watched before this was what was that movie with Sean Connery? That it was from like before James Bond, and we watched it for this.
Oh yeah, The Longest Day.
Yeah, I think that might have been the last time I watched a war movie. So I'm it's gonna be like for me, this is kind of just how I picture war movies. So I'm also gonna have a hard time imagining because I think you had said last time we spoke that this was the movie that kind of reinvented the genre before or for the new century. And so it's gonna be hard for me to speak to that. But I think we still will both probably have some valuable things to say, maybe.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because when I was watching this, first of all, I should say I'm glad you enjoyed this as much as you did because that honestly kind of surprises me. The movie's long and it's a violent war movie that's not entertaining in a typical way. It's more about like making you feel the impact. Um, but I was kind of worried we wouldn't have a whole lot to talk about. But yeah, I don't know. Going forward, what did you like the most about this?
Uh this is gonna this is gonna sound like when someone says though, oh, the lighting was really good, but like I for me I really enjoyed like pointing at the screen and saying like Oh, there's Phil from Modern Family. Oh, there's Bane. Oh, there's Mr. Fantastic. There's Jamie Lannister, and like almost everyone in the movie is somebody that you've seen before. I think there's the one guy, I don't remember the character's name, but he's one of the soldiers, and he's a black guy. He is in my favorite Western of all time, Lone Star, which is a Chris Cooper movie from I don't remember who directed it, but Chris Cooper is the main guy in it, and it's from like '96. And I was looking at this movie, I was like, where do I know this guy from? And I looked him up, and at the like almost the very bottom of Google, I see Lone Star, and I'm like, that's it, yeah. But yeah, so many actors, and like I was looking it up, and like Tom Hardy, this said it was his first film. I would have to double check, but for some reason I was thinking that Star Trek Nemesis was his first film, but that might have been like right after this. But yeah, he was in it, and then like you said, Orlando Bloom, and then like some actors, like I am familiar with Tom Sizemore because of Twin Peaks, but I wouldn't have necessarily, like, if I had caught this like on TV and I wasn't doing it for this podcast and I saw him, I wouldn't have immediately been like, oh, that's the guy from Twin Peaks. So there was a few in here, like William, is it Fitchner?
Yeah.
I only know him from The Dark Knight. And so, but is he like a pretty big actor in like stuff that I normally wouldn't watch?
No, he's like a character actor. He just kind of shows up and stuff, and is generally like a scene stealer in pretty bad movies.
Oh,
If you've seen that Nicolas Cage movie Drive Angry, he's the devil's accountant in that movie, and he's pretty
oh,
funny.
um, yeah, I need to watch that because I've heard that it's like entertaining in ways that they may not have meant for it to be. But
Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, like that's one of those like edge cases where I'm like, is this like no, it's crap or not?
but yeah, for me, like, you told me how to pronounce it before, and unfortunately I can't remember. Johan Griffith, is that right? Um,
Yeah, hey,
okay,
good on you.
yay! Look at me. He's in it, and but this is the other side to that coin. And I guess I'll just go ahead and rip the band-aid off now. The reason I realized that I don't really like watching war movies is like at the beginning of this movie, I was really enjoying getting to see all these people, and like Josh Hartnett, he's saying like I'm an idealist. I just want to make lives better for people, and they're all kind of teasing him, and Johan Griffith is there, kind of making fun of him. And then when we get into the combat situations, you I think use the word chaotic. It's cutting really fast, and there's a lot of gunfire, and it's loud, and you're not staying on one character very often. And also, they're all in the same clothes. They're all wearing helmets. And at that point, I have lost every thread. Like every now and then, I'll see like, oh wait, there's Josh Hartnett. I recognize him. But like all these actors who I recognize when they were back at the base, like one guy's making fun of Jason Isaacs, and like Orlando Bloom is there. He's reporting, and Ewan McGregor's making coffee. A lot of them, it's like I recognize them there, but then once they've got their helmets on and they're running around screaming and stuff, I'm losing track of who they all are, to the point where there's one guy that Hugh Dancy is in this. Hugh Dancy was in that Hannibal Lecter TV show. He was Will Graham, and he was also in the Clive Owen King Arthur movie. I did not recognize him because he usually has a lot more hair than he did in this movie. But he is the doctor, or he's the one who has to. He says his femoral artery has been cut, and we're gonna have to do like reach in. It's gonna be really painful. Comics Kid is gonna like avert his eyes for the whole scene. And that guy on the operating table, I was like, is that Orlando Bloom? And I actually had to Google it because I didn't see Orlando Bloom when they all made it back to base. And so I was like, did he die? And that's for me, I really enjoyed seeing just a cornucopia of actors that you recognize from other things. But then unfortunately, it was only like the first 20 minutes of the movie that I did. And then like I recognized Josh Hartnett. I don't know why I could recognize him, but a lot of these others I lost. Like I remember Ewan Brimmer. I could keep up with him because he's very Scottish, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And since I've seen him in Alien versus Predator, I think that might be the only other thing. I could be
And he's
wrong.
in Wonder Woman. He's in the first
Oh,
Wonder
that's
Woman.
right. Yeah. And also in Wonder Woman, didn't he play someone who was kind of like suffering from PTSD?
I think he did. He was also Scottish in that because he wore a kilt.
Okay, yeah. And in this, he doesn't necessarily suffer from PTSD, but that is kind of a thing. We can talk about it later. But yeah. So I recognize Josh Hartnett, I recognize Ewan Brimmer, and then other than that, there was a whole lot of actors where like once they would take their helmet off, I'd be like, oh wait, that's who that is. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, it was hard for me to keep up with the individual plot threads of each given character throughout most of the movie.
Yeah, no, I that's something I want to I'll agree with you on. Especially the first time I watched this, I wasn't aware that that's what kind of movie it was. And so I think going into this, being aware that not only is it a bunch of soldiers, it's a bunch of different factions of soldiers, and you have to sort of track each of them as they're going and then splitting off and then grouping up and then going back and then a new group comes at the end and like that can get a little confusing, especially since, as you said, not only are they wearing like helmets and they're all like wearing uniforms. A lot of this takes place at night, and it can be hard to make out what they look like. I think Josh Hartnett. I agree. Like, I think I know what it is about his face. He looks like he could be related to Benicio del Toro.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
he's got like those very strong features, like his cheekbones going down into his chin, and like kind of has like his eyes kind of have like a Clint Eastwood squint to them, and I don't know, he has like a very distinct set of teeth. I don't know, something about him. Yeah, I agree. Um, Here's something though about this movie that's kind of funny. Um, when it starts off, because I agree with you, I actually quite like the beginning, and there's more characterization off the top than you would necessarily think, and I think it does do a good job of kind of setting up the guys, but also kind of setting up like kind of the American understanding of the situation.
Hmm.
Uh, at home, but kind of doing that, I think, efficiently by marrying that with the soldiers, kind of at headquarters, speculating on, this place that they are in, this conflict that they are in. But when you early on, though, Orlando Bloom shows up and he's the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new recruit, and they're like, "All right, Orlando, here's our, world-weary and knowledgeable, captain, Josh Hartnett." And in my head, Josh Hartnett is like perpetually 15,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so I'm like, this is so weird to me. Like, is Josh Hartnett like older than Orlando Bloom? And then he's not. I looked it up. Josh Hartnett is 2 years younger than
Okay,
him.
yeah, because Ewan McGregor says you look like you're about 12. He says that to Orlando Bloom, and I was thinking like, okay, so I've looked it up. The faculty was 98. I don't know when H2O was, but that H2O was his first movie, I think, and he was a high school student in that. So I was thinking like, if he is older, and it's not by much, and I'm surprised to hear you say that he's younger, but yeah, that's that I like Josh Hartnett in the role, but you're right. That is kind of funny that they're like playing him like that at the beginning.
Yeah, and but it's almost funny because there's like a sort of a gear shift where they're like, he's actually an idealist, which I think is why they went with the younger guy. Um, but that scene though, where Orlando Bloom first is like talking to Ewan McGregor, is funny to me because you can just hear them both trying to hide their respective accents behind nowhere American Midwestern accents.
Hmm.
Maybe it's because I've just heard Ewan McGregor talk a lot. I know he's Scottish. um, as George Lucas said, he sounds like fat bastard. I should send you that video clip. He's talking to George Lucas is talking to Robin Williams for some reason, and he's just talking about like, yeah, we hired Ewan. He doesn't sound anything like Alec Guinness. He's very Scottish. Sounds like fat bastard. And then the whole time, Robin Williams is like, and he starts doing his fat bastard impression. It's really good. But
I just want now, like, in Revenge of the Sith when Order 66 is happening and like Yoda is like grabbing his chest like he's having a heart palpitation. I
yeah,
just want to cut to Obi-Wan and he just screams, "I've lost my mojo." Um, sorry
um,
that
Yoda
uh,
grabbing his heart is one of my most used gifts. Um, Especially when I look at like the news, I just respond with that. So, but yeah, it's funny because like, and then it's like, is Orlando Bloom like Welsh or something? Like he has like a vaguely European accent, and it's just kind of funny where they're talking to each other, and it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've heard them talk elsewhere, but I'm like, that's not their voice. What? But it is kind of funny though. You're talking about actors. This movie's kind of like a reunion for. It's a couple of different reunions. It's a Train Spotting reunion because it has Ewan McGregor and Ewan Bremner.
Hmm.
Um, I will always know Ewan Bremner as Spud from the movie Train Spotting. And then it's also a Saving Private Ryan reunion because it has Tom Sizemore and it also has oh goodness, I have to look at the cast. It's got one of the guys from another one of the guys from Saving Private Ryan. Um, but no, it was just kind of like it's just crazy how many people are in this, and I just have to wonder if Tom Sizemore was just like contractually obligated to be in every war movie around this.
I yeah, the cast, and I know, I mean, I'm never gonna stop beating this dead horse, but like for me, like it's I don't know if I want to say that it's too big because like Ty Burrell, unless I missed it, he only has one scene in the movie, and it's when it's close to the end. It's like in the last half hour, and there's some guys who are being hooked up to ID bags, and he says like, "Hey guys, do you want margaritas? They're not salted." And then that was the only time that I noticed him in the movie. Now he may have had like three or four other scenes, but that was the only time that I noticed him. And so I'm almost wondering, like I don't think, did you ever watch the TV series Cougar Town?
No, I did not.
The guy who played Bobby in that, who is he plays the ex-husband of the lady who played Monica on Friends. He has a scene in this movie, and it's pretty good. Like he's the one who gives a pep talk to the other guy, and he says like, "Everyone here feels like you do, but what you do next is what matters." And it really took me out because in Cougar Town he has this like very southern drawl, and here like. I knew that he was in the movie because I had already looked at the cast, so I was waiting for him, but otherwise I wouldn't have recognized him. But then that I think was like the only scene that that guy has too. And I can't help but wonder if my problem with like not being able to keep up with the cast, if that would have been taken care of if we had less of a cast.
Yeah, that's kind of the big catch 22. By the way, Barry Pepper was the other guy who was in Saving Private Ryan, who's
Okay,
also
yeah. Oh, was he in the your friendly bartender?
yeah, he was in Battlefield Earth.
Oh, poor
Um,
guy. At
yeah,
least he was able to get work after that. I'll give him that.
yeah, I like Barry Pepper, but no, the kind of catch 22 with this sort of thing is like it's a real event, and there is effort here made to be, you know, adhering to the timetable that
Mhm.
there was, and like being realistic about this concerned a lot of people. This was like a big screw up, and it cost the lives of a lot of people. We have accounts, we have like all these things, and so I do wonder, why you cast this many like, but I say why you have this many big actors, but I guess like a lot of these weren't big actors yet, so scratch that, never mind. Um, I would be willing to bet there is like hours and hours and hours of like deleted scenes when it comes to this movie, because I'm sure the way they did this is like they probably had different actors on set, and it's like, okay, this is company A, company B, company C, company D. These are the Rangers. These are like the, you know, what the number like, you like we have like this kind of army, this kind of Marines, these people. Like we just have everybody, and the way it works is they probably just like, now let's shoot all of our scenes where they're like all together, but now let's shoot like with just these actors, and we'll like shoot all of their scenes kind of, and then we'll go in and shoot all of the next people's scenes. So like I'm sure Ty Burrell was on set for a while, and
Mhm.
there's probably a lot of footage of him, and he probably has his own little thing going on. And then when they were editing it, like they're cutting across all these different people, and in the final product, you only get like one scene that you can remember.
Yeah, that's probably a safe bet. And you might be able to speak to this better than I can, but I was surprised when you said there was an extended cut of this movie because then I was thinking, well, which one did I watch? The one I watched, I think, was 2 hours and 34 minutes long. Does that sound like the shorter cut?
Yeah, that looks like it's the
Okay.
theatrical.
But I was surprised initially, but then I shouldn't have been because I think just about every Ridley Scott movie has a regular cut and then an extended cut. Like, or the ones I can think of. Like there was a couple years ago when you were talking about watching through his movies, you had convinced me to buy the extended cut of Legend, and I had seen the shorter cut like many years ago, like over 10 years ago, and then I watched the extended cut, and I liked it. But yeah, that's something with his movies where I have the extended cut of Robin Hood, and I remember watching it and thinking like, I remembered the scene. I knew the scenes that were not in the theatrical cut, and I was thinking, these probably could have. It was fine that they cut those
Yeah.
for the theatrical, but yeah. So you're probably right. There probably is a ton of footage with the number of characters that they are dealing with here.
Yeah, see, this is an interesting thing because Ridley Scott is one of those directors who has very like a lot of extended versions. Like Blade Runner is like notorious,
Hmm.
but then you have Legend, which is a miracle that they're able to find that director's cut, and any number that I could also point to. But then there's like also like the early 2000s with the home media boom. You have this interesting effect where companies are just trying to put out alternate cuts of a film in order to promote buying the movie. You know,
Hmm.
so like, and that's what I think like the Alien director's cut is like they were having a director's cut from everyone else, and they were like James Cameron, and then like the French guy who made Alien Resurrection, and then they were able to like David Fincher said, go away. I don't care about Alien 3. So they said, we'll call it an assembly cut. But then they were like trying to like have alternate cuts for all of them. And so when they reached out to Ridley Scott, they're like, please make a director's cut. And he's like, I don't really have a director's cut. So the director's cut of Alien is just something he kind of shrugged and like did. It's like there's like a 2 minute difference. I actually do think that I like the director's cut of Alien more. I think he tightened up a lot of stuff there. But then there's something like this, which I would also bet. See, I'd be curious because this is around the time where there's still. Okay, first of all, I don't know when the extended cut came out. I'm just assuming it came out when this hit DVD as like a
I would
bonus.
say, yeah, I'd say so.
And then, so it's like this is around the time that film projection is still like the. I don't think there is digital projection yet because I don't even think we've like started shooting digitally yet, or maybe we've started shooting. I don't know if any have been released yet. And so the way you would measure the length of a film would be by reels, and like I can't remember if like a reel is 20 minutes of film, and so it's like this is a 5 reeler, this is a 6 reeler, like stuff like that. And so,
Hmm.
so I don't know if it's a matter of like maybe these are scenes that Ridley Scott wanted to be in, because and I'm looking at online and it's like some of these differences are like a matter of like 1 or 2 seconds. There's a scene where when Orlando Bloom's helicopter first arrives at the army base on the beach, it like kicks up sand and like getting in everyone's food, and people are sunbathing and it's kicking up sand in their face, and that was not in the theatrical version. But I like that scene. It's a nice little like scene that adds texture to like life on base.
Hmm.
But maybe it was just a thing where it's like, okay, when we send this out to theaters, we need to cut this because it doesn't fit on the amount of reels we're going to send out. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
so like that's like I'm just curious if like that is the case, if it's he did have a final cut and they said you need to trim out 8 minutes, and then he said okay fine, so that the way they could make it, because I think at 2.5 hours, a little over 2.5 hours, this is like getting towards the end of whatever number of reels it was, and they probably didn't think it was cost effective to add another reel just for 8 minutes of footage. So I don't know.
That could be. I did read about Superman 4, how they wanted that movie to be. I think what I heard was like half an hour shorter. Like they wanted cut because they said, well, we can show it more times in a day if it's shorter. And I wonder if that also had maybe a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, I mean that would make it even more cost protective to be like, not only is it like we can fit more show times, but it's also probably an entire less reel per theater that we need to print and send out. So
Hmm.
that probably saves some pennies too.
Um, so Connor, I didn't ask you, what is your favorite part of the movie?
So yeah, like I like it, and I think I just find it to be very effective. I think this is just a very strongly directed film. Um, it's obviously like it has some pretty shots, but like it is more of like the sound and the editing and the way like see like you have to understand, like I've seen Michael Bay's 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, which is desperately trying to be this. And that's like a movie that I feel like completely crumbles under like the chaos that it's trying to capture. Um
Is
and
that the
I
one that has Pam's boyfriends from The Office?
Yes, it
Oh,
does. Great meme, by the way.
yeah. I remember you reviewing that, or you were either telling me about it or you had done a video. I remember because you said there was a car chase, and at one point you said, "Wait a minute, there's two separate cars." like they're like
Yeah, there's two black SUVs, and there's like two different, like our group gets split up into two different SUVs. And like I'm feeling like we're following one people. I'm like, why does like the setup keep changing? And then it's like eventually I realized, oh, we've been cutting between the two black SUVs.
Mhm.
And I didn't really realize that. Yeah, but like this is where it becomes like interesting. Like I was saying earlier, where like this movie sort of I guess revolutionized the war movie for the 21st century because I guess Call of Duty is I've never played Call of Duty, but I've been told like Call of Duty is just like Black Hawk Down in video game form.
Oh.
Uh, Everything from like the production design, like colors, the way things are like set up, and like it has a very like run and gun thing. It's very fast paced. I keep going to the word chaotic. Um, and I can understand why. And I think about all the movies I grew up watching, that were popular when I was growing up. I may or may not have watched them, but I think about Paul Greengrass doing his Bourne movies, or I think about J.J. Abrams doing like Mission Impossible 3, or I think about Michael Bay. Even pre 13 Hours, he was shooting the military and deserts in like the Transformers movies. Like just I could go on and on and on and on about all the different filmmakers throughout the 2000s that were doing desert warfare or were doing war movies. And when I was growing up, the idea I had in my head of war movies was basically just this. And I think this is what starts that. I mean, you can go back a little bit further to Saving Private Ryan, but that's World War II. As far as
Mhm.
like the model for like what a contemporary warfare looks like, this is what that is. And I mean, like I get it. I get why this made a big splash. Like it's very visceral. It's very intense. Like I that scene where they need to do a surgery is like harrowing. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of there's like it's not just this thing could get really repetitive, but it doesn't. They keep finding ways to ratchet up the tension. I like how we keep checking in on people, like the stuff with Spud, like that's or sorry, Ewan Bremner, like that's kind of like this movie's version of a comic relief, but it's like an uneasy comic relief. You feel like the other shoe's going to drop because he's just kind of sitting around waiting lookout, and he is all of a sudden getting worried that maybe he got the wrong memo or something, and like
Mhm.
I like all that. I like how there's like like I was just saying um with the surgery. There's like when the helicopter first crashes, like I first thought when I first watched it, like it was just going to be these guys next to a helicopter fighting off people, and it's much bigger than that, and I think it's a lot more creative than that. Yeah, no, they oh my gosh, the part where they're like in that building and there's like I thought when the two groups sort of meet up in the building, I thought they were gonna start shooting at each other when they're on the same
Mhm.
side. But like it's that thing where like it feels like you're a participant in the action as well as a spectator of it, and I find that kind of immersive quality to be pretty impressive.
Yeah. I also agree that this movie, for as long as it is, I also feared it was gonna be repetitive and that there would be like just I'd be looking at my watch and I really wasn't. And I think maybe that comes down to like there is several different groups that you can cut to. So you're not spending, half an hour with Josh Hartnett and his group that are trapped in that building. You've got the guys back at base who are like, what's going on down there? And then you've got Spud and his group. And then you've got, at one point, a guy gets, man, this might have even been worse than the surgery for me, is when the two guys, like, there's, this giant mob attacks them and it looks like they're about to, like, tear a guy apart with their hands. And, like,
Yeah,
one of them is, like, just looking at the picture of his wife and kid and they hit him in the face with the gun and they kidnap him. And then I'm torn on how I feel about it because then that guy is brought to I guess was it the main guy that they're trying to catch or was he just like a lieutenant in that guy's like army?
I feel like it was just a lieutenant in that guy's army.
Okay, because we never actually get to see the main guy that they're after, right?
I don't think so. Yeah, and that's
Okay,
actually a detail I really like about the movie.
Yeah, I think I do too. And we get a couple of people. We get the guy who was the pirate captain from Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's in this.
Oh yeah, that's right.
John. No, it's a name that sounds like he could have been a Beatle. Like his name sounds like that. But he was also, for anyone pothead, he was uh in Harry Potter. Oh, who was he in that? Oh no. Uh, wow. um, I hate that I'm googling black guy in Harry Potter, but I'm
Oh.
sorry. I'm sorry. I don't remember the character's name.
No, I just feel
Um,
bad for you. That's all.
yeah. Um,
uh,
he played. Got him right here. It's a picture. I'll get back to it. Anyway, so he's there. He's like the he's not. He's Kingsley
he's a
Shacklebolt.
he's an arms dealer, right? Like, and
Yeah, yeah, and they're like, well, we're trying to catch this other guy. But then it's someone else who he's like, kind of taunting this guy that he has prisoner, and he's like, well, we can negotiate. And the guy says, well, I'm just a pilot, I'm not in charge. And the guy has a line where he says like, oh, so you can kill, but you can't negotiate. And I was thinking like, well, that's not fair. They're here trying to feed people who are starving, and you're like making fun of him because he's killing people. But also I was like, because this was probably very much like how it played out in real life, like where that guy got released, like because at the end in the credits it said he got released I think 10 days later. So they probably just didn't have enough time in the movie to follow that plot thread up. And I, on the one hand, like that was like probably the most tense scene for me. It's a runner up between that and the surgery scene. um but the scene where the guy's like looking at the picture as they're coming in for him. But that scene, if you're just watching the movie itself, kind of just doesn't go anywhere. And I kind of wish it did, but at the same time, I wouldn't want them to just start making stuff up to like tidy everything up at the end.
yeah, I know that's one of those things where it is because it's like I see how that plot deviation happened. Like he's a part of one of the groups that is participating in it. Like if someone gets kidnapped and like is talking with the enemy, like we need to see that. And then like then there's just kind of like the natural beats that the movie is playing on, and just sort of like the rhythm it's going by, and all of a sudden things are wrapping up. Like maybe they shot that scene, and then when they were editing it, like, it's feels like it's going on too long and stuff like that. Um, yeah, but I agree. Like it is kind of there are a few things like that kind of sprinkled throughout, and um, I think that's also another kind of weird thing when it comes to not just war movies, but movies based on real life. Like I generally don't like it when movies have like the text at the end that just kind of explains what happened.
Hmm.
Because it's like, well, then why did we watch the movie? If you're making the movie to tell the story, why do you only tell 80% of the biopic? Like, and always it's always funny when you watch a musician's biopic and it's like they've sold 60 million copies. Like, I mean, in 2 years that's going to be outdated. And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah, like why? How come like you don't have someone in the movie saying, "At this point, you've sold this many records, Elvis. You're the biggest superstar in the world." We need to have a text house. But what's kind of interesting about this movie is how like it opens up with text, and I'm not used to that. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it gives you a very brief bullet point kind of timetable of 1993 and what's going on with like the situation in Somalia and like the world's response to it. And then what I liked is that when you see the soldiers getting there, some of them are like, "Look, we're just soldiers. We're just here to do a job." And then you have people like the Josh Hartnett character who are more idealistic. I think Orlando Bloom falls into that same category too, where they just want to help.
Hmm.
And what's good about all of this though is that no one really knows anything. They have like, "Hey, I'm just here to do my job," or "I'm an idealist," or whatever, but they don't really know much about this environment they're in. And I think that's telling of like the American populace, at least, where it's like we don't actually know what's going on in Somalia. We only know what the news tells us. We only know like the bullet points off the top of the movie. And so what's kind of cool about a lot of this movie is sort of the discovery of the situation, and I think that makes it very unpredictable. Is because the characters have no idea what they're in for either.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the text because normally with the exception of Star Wars, normally I would say don't open your movie with the text crawl. I would say there are ways that you can get across exposition, and I really hate as you know dialogue. Like if I said to you,
Yep.
as you know, Connor, we are going to put this audio on YouTube. Well, if Connor knows it, then there's no point in me telling him that. And I really hate that kind of dialogue. Um, and some people would say, but then how do you get it? Like, there's a way you can do it. Sometimes you might have to be really clever, but like there are ways to do it. And in prose, I think there's even more ways you can do it. And
Yep.
sometimes I will see, as you know, dialogue in a book, and that really kills me because it's like you could have a short little 2 sentence exposition paragraph cutting in between dialogue, and you can do that just fine. But what
Yeah, I guess for the audience, I can give an example of this.
okay, yeah.
I wouldn't have a character say, "No, comics kid, when we met, as you know, through Who Reviews the Reviewers on Geek Solution, what I would say is, hey, comics kid, remember when we met, like just after we met when we were on Who Reviews the Reviewers, this person that we were in the competition with did this. You know what I mean? Like, it's one character triggering another person's memory and then sliding in that where we met sort of signals kind of how long ago it would have been, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good example. And so I this movie is choosing like it would have been really weird for like I don't know Josh Hartnett to say to Eric Bana, as you know, that warlord over there, he's starving the people. Like that would have just taken me right out of the movie. So this movie chooses to do the text crawl thing. But what I like about it, because I've seen people argue that when you do a text crawl, that you're opening in the like film is a visual medium, and when you're opening with just a bunch of words, that is killing the visual. Like you're reading something when you like the argument is you want to see this stuff play out. But what I think this movie does very well is that it's short little sentences cut between footage of like starving people who are being like sewn up in like a shroud, and being like you're seeing all these dead bodies all over the place, and so it is painting a very horrifying picture for you while it is getting all of the information that you need on the screen. And it takes about 3 minutes, I think, but it does a really good job of succinctly giving you what you need. But it also is showing you like the horrors of war, or not even war, but kind of war. The aftermath of this warlord kind of doing this. And
But it's
that's
probably what the soldiers probably saw and heard on the news and what motivated them to come over too.
that's a good bet, yeah. And so it's giving you information. Really, it's giving you twice as much information as like any other movie might with a big text crawl. And I really appreciated it because I didn't even know what this movie was about whenever you chose it. I knew that it had a big cast and I knew it was a war movie, but I didn't know which war. I don't know when the Black Hawk helicopter was invented, and so I would have made a guess. Well, maybe this is a World War II film, kind of like Saving Private Ryan. And so I like that this was like, yeah, it's 1993, and this is what's going on, because I was alive in 93, but I wasn't watching the news. I wasn't watching the news in 2001, really. And so this, for someone who was maybe, in their 30s when this came out, they might have remembered all of this happening just a few short years earlier. And they might have thought, oh, you don't have to put all that on there. But I feel like there's a much wider group of people who are going to be in the dark, and this does kind of help get them into the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I remember after I finished watching this, I talked to my stepdad about it, and he was saying like he remembers when the Black Hawk went down, and it was just like this, like what is happening? Like, oh, nobody knows what they're doing. Like it's like this like big snafu. And it's weird because like when it comes to war movies, like I'm sorry, what were you just saying?
Um, text crawl, and like giving the information to us that we don't know about.
Oh, it was a little after that. It was like the last thing you kind of finished up with.
Uh, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. Well, watching the news and like not knowing like about this kind of thing.
Okay, man. I think I maybe just forgot. I'm so sorry, everybody.
Oh,
I am this tired. So
that's fine.
but yeah, no, it's but like One thing I will say about this movie, though, that's interesting, it was not nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, but it was nominated for Best Director. And this is one of those, and it was nominated for like a plethora of technical awards. I think it won like Best Sound, obviously. Like this movie sounds insane. Like I have the 4K disc, and you guys have 4K technology and like the sound and all that. It's a worthy disc to invest in. But this is one of my like favorite like things that like favorite things to kind of point out when it comes to, like the Oscars. I think getting it wrong. Now I've not seen A Beautiful Mind. All right, so I don't want to diss on that movie. I'm not calling it a bad movie. I just think it's kind of amusing that for the year 2001, the nominees for Best Director were Ridley Scott for reinventing the war film, Peter Jackson for creating Middle Earth, David Lynch for Mulholland Drive, Robert Altman, who is one of the guys in the Hollywood or the new Hollywood movement. He made Nashville and MASH and The Long Goodbye and just a lot of important movies. And Ron Howard for a biopic starring Russell Crowe. And Ron Howard won. It's like, wow, that is the year like the old guard showed up. And they all four of them got taken out by like just kind of a pretty decent workman director. But it's really funny when you watch footage from that Oscars, like David Lynch just goes up to Robert Altman and whispers something in his ear. And that's been like one of those great mysteries of what did he whisper in Robert Altman's ear?
And we'll probably never know, because if we go up to David Lynch and ask him, he'll say, "Who are you? And what are you talking about?" Like he won't remember.
He'll say, "I went to the Oscars."
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Of course, I don't put as much into like award ceremonies and stuff as some people do, but yeah, that at the very least, like hearing you, because I've heard of like some of those movies, and I am so like I've only seen maybe one scene from what was it, not Rain Man, but
Oh, Beautiful Mind.
yeah, I haven't seen that movie either, so maybe it's a great film, but
Well, I
I
hear it is very good.
yeah, I wonder if this was a situation where it's like, wow, we've got a lot of really good choices. So what do we, what was the year where Star Trek Beyond came out, and it was the same 2016, right? And
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
and Suicide Squad won Best Movie for Makeup. And then you told me about a meme where it's like it shows a picture of Harley Quinn with like lipstick like smeared on her cheek, and then like this creature that's like got a plant coming out of its head, and then Suicide Squad won. Like it's not a situation
And
like
I
that.
think it's even worse than that. Those were the only two nominees.
Oh, what was the worst part?
That they were the only two nominees in that
Oh,
category.
oh,
Suicide Squad won.
oh yeah, that is worse. Yeah. Because I mean it's already bad that that Suicide Squad was nominated when that was the I mean you have and I mean for me like I don't know like looking at Killer Croc how much of that is CGI and how much of that is like a prosthetic suit like the Michael Chiklis thing, but yeah you have I don't know anyway I'm getting off topic, but like this may have been a year where it's like we've got a lot of really good choices, and no matter what we pick, we're picking something really good, and then something really good is going to lose. Maybe it was something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like, Beautiful Mind won like picture and leading actor and director. It was kind of like the most agreeable of them, and apparently it's a very good movie too. So like, I'm not dissing on it at all, but I haven't seen it. It's just like if I want to be that guy and I can be like, all right, your lineup is Ridley Scott, Peter Jackson, Robert Altman, David Lynch, and Ron Howard. Who wins Best Director just from that lineup?
Hmm.
I think most people would go, all right, so Ron Howard's, him showing up is him winning. But all right, anyways, let's look at the four other people. But that's not what happened. Ron Howard won, so it's kind of fun.
um, what I would say if it wasn't for I don't know how like I feel like in award ceremonies and stuff like it's kind of am I stepping out of line to say that a lot of times it's rare for like a fantasy or sci-fi or superhero thing to win something like that?
It's uncommon, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I remember when was it a few years ago where they said they should create a new category for like basically they were like, oh, we don't want like superhero movies to win our real awards, so we're going to create like a new category. I may be completely misremembering, but the if it was just Lord of the Rings losing, I would have said, as like monumental a task of making those movies, not only just making them, but making them as good as they were, as monumental a task as that was, like I could still see people like being like, oh, Lord of the Rings, that's got wizards and creatures in it, like that's for little babies or whatever. Like, it's kind of like Mad Max Fury Road. I remember people kind of raising a stink because it didn't win something that was like, and people were theorizing that, well, it's because it's like a action sci-fi movie, and so some people are thinking maybe that's why it didn't win. But then this is a war movie, and I don't know how. Like, are they often kind of snubbed at awards shows?
See, like war movies always have like a presence. Like the 2022 All Quiet on the Western Front won 4 of the Oscars.
Oh,
But like in the more major categories, it was just not a nominee. But like Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, now like tied the record for most awards won by film. Um, and in just this last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once became the first science fiction film to ever win like Best Picture. And not only did it win Best Picture, it won like everything. But yeah, no, like
everywhere all at once.
hey, yeah, wow.
I'm here all week.
I can't believe oh man. But and then I think more recently there have been a lot of like kind of neater, like kind of more offbeat stuff winning. Like I don't know if you ever saw The Shape of Water. I really like that movie. It's a weird Guillermo del Toro movie.
Hmm.
But that won the top prize. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't mean to. Oh, and Paris, like Hitchcock thriller, and it's awesome. It's basically art house people under the stairs, and it's really good, and it won. Anyways, so I don't mean to just talk about the Oscars so much, but yeah, no, war movies like they have presences, but they don't win as often as like I think some people might think they do. Like notoriously, Saving Private Ryan lost to Shakespeare in Love. So
Yeah, I heard. I remember reading about that, and someone was kind of saying like, what's up with that? Like it's Shakespeare, sure, but which is, I mean, it's not a Shakespeare, but anyway. Yeah, and I remember reading someone saying like Saving Private Ryan like was robbed. But like I say, that's one of those things I a lot of times don't really uh put as much value on as other people do.
yeah, and like the value I put on it is like more of like a historical curiosity. Like I
Right.
think like if there's any way to sort of track like okay at this time this is what the people making films thought were like the important stuff. Obviously, like history will have the final say, but like it is kind of interesting to now we look at like Vertigo as one of the best movies ever, and it got like no nominations at the Academy Awards that
Oh,
year. Like
wow.
Gigi won that year, and that is now in history regarded as one of the worst Best Picture winners, and not just because of Vertigo. It was just like a lot of people just don't like that movie. So it's just kind of to me, it's interesting to kind of look back in that way and kind of track it that way. But a lot of people don't really think about or watch movies from over 3 years ago. Everyone always goes, we should hand out awards to movies that people are going to remember. And if you watch The Disaster Artist, it opens up with like an interview of somebody saying, nobody remembers the Best Picture winner of the year The Room came out, but we remember The Room. And it's like, you mean 2003? The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. People just like to say that we don't remember because people don't remember release years. I don't know. I'm just now I'm ranting and soapboxing, but I like The Disaster Artist, but the opening like couple of minutes are the worst part about it.
Oh,
Anyways, Black Hawk Down.
oh yeah, that's a movie. I a little off topic, but or more on topic, I guess I should say. This has the guy who played Danko in Heroes season 4. Yeah, he's in it, and I feel like I see him like all over the place. He was in what was that movie with Argo? He was in Argo, and I was like, hey, it's Danko, and I'm sure that he looks like I've seen him in enough stuff by now where he's probably a character actor who just is in a bunch of stuff all the time. But I first saw him in Heroes, and I'm sure if he was here, he would be like, "Can you please remember me for literally anything else?" But yeah, he will always be Danko from Heroes. It also has the guy he was in X-Men First Class, and he was the guy I think you once said. that he would, if they made a like a biopic about Bobby's dad from Twin Peaks, that he could make a good Bobby's dad. Um, like he, I don't. The actor's name is Glenn Morshower, and he was a,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, he was a general in First Class. He was the one who he brings a grenade to try and kill Sebastian Shaw on that little boat. But yeah, he was in it, and I think he might have been one of the. I'm trying. I'm not sure because I'm looking at some of the other people on the Internet Movie Database here, and I have to assume that this guy was one of the ones like back at base who's like, what's going on out there? But there were only, I think, two guys who were there, like kind of talking with each other while all that was going on. So I'm not sure if he was one of them or if he was someone else that I can't remember.
Yeah, no, this is definitely one of those movies where people do kind of get lost in the mix. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with this movie? Because I feel like, you know,
Um,
outside of the sensation of watching it, it's kind of hard to talk about.
right. I will say this. I think this movie does a good job of, and I want to say it delicately, but I don't know how. I feel like at the beginning, there's a certain ego that you see with a lot of the soldiers, and it's played very well with all of them are also very clearly they're nervous. Like when they're at one point they're all kind of laughing because the one guy is making fun of Jason Isaacs, and at one point Eric Bana like cuts in line to get food, and like Orlando Bloom is trying to tell him like, hey, stop cutting line, and like they're all in their own little way. They all kind of are like, look at me, I'm a big tough guy, like. But you can also tell that part of that is like the art, like where they're teasing Josh Hartnett about like, "Ooh, you're an idealist, haha." But you can also tell that they're all just like struggling to hold on to their sanity, and bravado is like the best way that they know how to do it. And especially like whenever they are getting ready to go into combat, and Ewan McGregor, like at the beginning, he is kind of complaining to Orlando Bloom, like, I don't get to go into combat. I'm here typing. And then there one guy hurts his hand somehow, so then it's like, Ewan McGregor, you're up, you get to go. And then he's very clearly nervous, and everyone else is like, oh, you won't need your canteen, we'll only be out there for a couple of minutes, and you won't need your night vision goggles, we'll only be out there a couple of minutes. And then of course this is when everything goes wrong. But everyone at that point, it seems like, oh, Ewan McGregor is like the little baby who's never gone out here before, and everyone is kind of like, I remember my first time. And then, of course, it all hits the fan, and then everyone is scared and nervous in their own way. And I like that. I like the way that it's playing that. Because a lot of times when you see a movie that has a group of soldiers like this, they are played with that kind of bravado and a sense of ego, but you usually don't see them play the more tender side of it as well. And I like that this is kind of showing both sides, and maybe this one side is why this other side is so prevalent.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think it's also worth noting that like these soldiers are each like the elite squad of soldiers in their respective branch. And I think
Mhm.
that maybe like adds to that ego. I don't know, I've actually known a lot of veterans in my time, so like that kind of um, hoorah, like cockiness is something I'm kind of familiar with now. Like I find it endearing because I think I get where it comes from. And I think it might be what you're talking about, where it is that like we've been like bred to be the best. You know, like we've
Mhm.
gone through like insane training, and like you can't really achieve that without developing that confidence. And then there's also like that it's maybe also like a mask or like a projection to like kind of guard you from the fear of like we could literally die tomorrow, like
Mhm.
or in an hour. Like it's so kind of almost spitting in the face of fear with confidence or whatever. I think that's
Yeah.
maybe where it comes from. But I can understand how like that to some people might be a little grating.
Right. And I think sometimes it is grating. In this case, I like the way they play it in that it's there, but you're seeing why it's there. And I'm sure that's the intention a lot of times, but quite often it doesn't come across as well as I think it does here.
And I think yeah, and I think the reason why is because when we watch movies, typically the personalities of the cast are well balanced, and soldiers go through the same regiment, and while you can have like soldiers that are more idealistic and some that are just doing it for the job, they're all kind of soldiers. They're all kind of cut from that same cloth because they went through conditioning and training to be that way. So like it is what it is. But like yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. I I don't know if I have anything else to say. There was a guy who made a phone call, tried to make a phone call to his either girlfriend or wife at the beginning. Was he the one who gets captured at the end?
Oh goodness, I can't remember.
Okay, sorry. That was another one where I was thinking because she isn't there. She had like just come back from getting groceries, and he just hung up the phone when she gets back. And I was thinking, oh, this would be like if you're like narratively speaking, this would be your way to very heavy-handedly tell the audience he's gonna die. But then I was like, maybe he isn't. Maybe he's because I at the end I still like I know for sure like, oh, Eric Bana and Josh Hartnett and Jason Isaacs, but there was several that I didn't see at the end, so I wasn't sure who all did die and who didn't.
Yeah, no, I when they start biting the dust, it is like, oh my gosh, that person just said. There's like, boom, we're moving, and it's like that. There is that impact of like how quick life gets lost and how quick you have to move on. The side
Yeah.
effect is, wait, did Eric Bana die? But it is. I think it's a very good movie. It's not anything that I have like big problems with. It is just kind of like one of those things where, what do you prefer in the kind of action movies that you watch? I don't know. Maybe as time goes on, I might grow to love this movie even. But I do like it quite a bit, and it's not one of those movies that I enjoy. But it's like, I don't necessarily like. I own it. I say I'm gonna watch it again someday, but I probably won't. I'll probably watch this again a few more times.
Um, this is, I think, our third time with Johan Griffith. This is our second time with this podcast with uh, Tom Hardy. He was in that not Gotti, but the other one.
Oh,
And what was it? I'm sorry.
Capone, Capone.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we did one of the Venom movies that we as a little, one of its own things. But I'm trying to think. Oh, and then Josh Hartnett was in The Faculty. Was there anyone else in
Isn't
this who? The
isn't
what?
this the isn't this the fourth time we've talked about Johan Griffith? Because he's in Titanic and then the
Oh,
two.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I was mainly thinking of both the Fantastic Four movies, but yeah. My favorite Mr. Fantastic. Uh, of
He's
the of
good. Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's funny because when I was watching this, I'm like, what? Hold up, is that who I think it is? Like, I didn't even realize he was in this, and I had to like look up, pull out my phone. The one thing holding me back from watching this at home is like it's really loud, and I don't want my neighbors like taking a broom and hitting their ceiling. Tell them to turn it down.
That's like whenever the scene where the guy is like in the room and it's the woman with all the kids and he's just like putting his finger up to like be quiet. That's where you just need to like do that to your neighbor, even though they can't see you. You're just like shh, like
Yeah.
don't want them to hear us. Um, yeah, I don't have anything else to say. You didn't have any closing thoughts?
No, I feel like I more or less said, my piece. But Comics Kid, what are we talking about next time?
All right. Well, Connor, you and we visited the land of Oz once before and we hated it. We are going back, this time with the movie Return to Oz, which is on Disney Plus. Let me double check. But this movie has Piper Laurie in it, who was our Twin Peaks connection with the faculty. This is on Disney Plus, and now I have not. Well, I mean, I saw this movie once when I was like a little kid, and there's only like one scene from the movie that has stuck with me like over 25 years later, and so I don't remember how big of a part Piper Laurie has. Like I could just looking at like the top six or seven on Google, she's not there. But let me now I want to double check and make sure Piper Laurie is in this. But so this could be kind of like the original Wizard. She is in it, and so she may not have a big role, but I am going to risk it, and I am going to choose Return to Oz from 1980 something.
Thank you for picking this. This has been on my list for a very long time, and I recently watched The Wizard of Oz for the first time since I was probably 3 years old, like just
Oh,
a couple of months ago. So I'm like, hey, that's fresh in my mind.
yeah. So we may be able to just kind of double dip and talk about both of those.
It couldn't possibly be worse than Dorothy's Return to Oz,
No.
or whatever the heck that stupid animated movie was called.
Oh yeah, that one was a low point. I don't know what was worse, that or the Scorpion King. I think I enjoyed the Scorpion King a little bit more, but both were bad.
Yeah, I watched Scorpion King with my brother. That was fun. That was also
Mhm.
at the end of me binging the Scorpion King movies, like all of them, and the
Yeah.
Mummy.
Oh.
I'm happy Brendan Fraser's doing well, but
Mhm.
those Mummy movies suck. I don't like them.
I actually do I still like the first one, but
Everyone does.
well,
Everyone. I'm a crazy person in comics.
okay, yeah.
Everyone. It's a meme that movie's a masterpiece, and I'm like, how can you guys even find it endearing? I find it so annoying. I
It
don't even
is
really like the 1930s one, but how is that the best Mummy movie we have?
I will say I watched that when I was like 11. So like it is a for me if I watched it now, I don't know if I would like it as much as I do. It's probably more a nostalgia thing for me. I don't really like the second one. For a long time, I was like, oh, both the first two are good, and then after that, no. Which I mean, there's only one more after that, but or well, two if you count Tom Cruise. But I rewatched the first two recently, and I was like, the second one, I was like, this is suck. Like I don't know what like it's a lot worse than I remembered. And then the third one, I haven't seen it since like it was first given home release, and I really hated it. But yeah, I still kind of like the first one.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I
Uh,
still love you. I won't hold it
okay,
against you. But no, hey, this is now the second in a row that you picked Piper Laurie. So what
that's
we know
right.
is Comics Kid has a type. So
If you Google Piper Laurie from the 1960s, if
dude, I know.
you will not be disappointed. And this is not just for Connor. I give everyone the license to Google Piper Laurie 1960s or just Google Piper Laurie, really.
Yeah, no, that's what I did because I googled her and then like a picture popped. I'm like, who is that? Like, whoa, what? Like my eyes popped out of my skull. Yeah. So
Um,
hey, no, I co-sign your recommendation.
yeah. So that's it. We will talk about Return to Oz. It's on Disney Plus. And that's I think all that we have for today. So in the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
I will be sleeping.
All right. Bye.